But you're going to want to have these paper clips that are unfolded, because if you are finding one of these holes from a superior view, you can then turn it over and find out where it ends on the inferior side, the underside. Does that make sense? Okay, so starting at the front, actually starting in the eye socket, there is a very round hole at the back of the eye socket that points straight back and exits under, or enters the skull, I guess, under, this would be the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone. Yep. You finding it? Yep, you've got it. You've got it. Yep, okay. That is the optic canal. That's the tunnel that the optic nerve and blood vessels travel through as they leave the back of the eye and enter the brain. Okay? So from there, I just kind of work my way backwards. And the next hole that you encounter is a very round-shaped skull, or a round-shaped hole in the greater wing of the sphenoid bone, right? And it actually does exit, but it's kind of tricky. It exits kind of in that cheek region.
Do I have this right?
No. It's in front of that.
Wait, that one?
There you go, that one. Yep. Yeah. I think so. You found it? You kind of feel like you meet a dead end, but it's actually hiding under there. Yeah. Okay. So that one is very nice and round shaped. It is foramen rotundum. So I think round, rotundum. Whoops, right there. Okay. If I continue backwards from there, the next one that I run into is a very oval-shaped hole. Yeah. That is foramen oval. Okay. And it, exits kind of under on the bottom side, and it looks very oval-shaped there as well. Okay. Unless you have a real skull in which it looks like it's falling apart. Yeah. Okay. From foramen oval, if you go either backwards, towards the back, or sometimes out to the side. It depends on the skull that you're looking at. So kind of back and more lateral, you're going to run into a teeny tiny little spiky hole, very close to foramen oval, that I think of as spiky or spiny. Mm-hmm. It is foramen spinosum, so spiny, spiky, tiny, okay? Make sense? Okay. Okay, so if you find foramen oval and foramen spinosum, I think of them as, kind of a little pair, and then you go towards the middle or more medial, kind of towards that sella turcica region, you will run into a hole that I think looks kind of big and open, kind of like a laceration. So that's foramen lacerum. So I think laceration, lacerum. You find that? Yeah?
What was the name of that?
Foramen lacerum, or laceration, I think laceration, right? Now, foramen lacerum is connected via a groove to another hole that from the top is kind of hard to find, but if you flip it over, it's a very obvious hole, right? But from the top, it's connected via that groove to foramen lacerum. And what I remember there is it's connected, it's the carotid, right? The carotid canal is connected to lacerum. Okay. From there, if you continue backwards, it kind of looks like you start climbing up a mountain and going down the backside. And about halfway down the backside of this mountain, there's a cave. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just a cave. That mountain is where the inner ear apparatus is housed, right? So like your balance and hearing structures. That cave, partway down the mountain, is called the internal acoustic meatus, also known as the internal auditory meatus. And that's where nerves exit that inner ear apparatus and move towards the brain. That is in contrast to this hole, which is the external auditory meatus or external acoustic meatus. That's your ear hole. Like that's what you can stick your finger or your Q-tip in. The reason the internal and the external don't connect to each other is that that inner ear apparatus is all windy and bony and it's not a continuous tunnel. Okay? All right. So if you go back to that internal acoustic meatus and continue down the backside of that mountain, you will end up at this big jagged hole. Right? It's like very big, very jagged, weirdly shaped. It's the jugular foramen. So I think jagged jugular. Okay. All right. So from there, if you continue back, you run into this big hole where your brainstem and spinal cord exit. That's foramen magnum. So magnum is big, right? And then the last one you need to know, you actually have to flip the skull over and look from the underside. And that is the hypoglossal canal. The hypoglossal canal travels horizontally, so I think hypoglossal horizontal, and it travels through the occipital condyles. And it carries the hypoglossal nerve, which exits the brainstem area and moves towards the tongue. So glossus refers to tongue. So it kind of makes sense if you think about it, that if you have a nerve that's leaving the brainstem area and it has to get to the tongue, it's going to have to go through those occipital condyles.